Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading, and then we examine a single relevant question the passage points us to. This week we're looking at a single theme that's woven through our reading. Can I trust God with my everyday life? Today I'm joined by Sheryl, Daughety, and we're looking at this passage from Genesis 17 today. So walking is a term that's been used in Genesis to refer to those whose life is pleasing to God. You have Enoch. It said Enoch lived 365 years walking in close fellowship with God. Then one day he disappeared because God took him. In Noah, it said, this account of Noah, Genesis chapter 6, this is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. We're going to find that Abraham's encouraged to walk with God too. However, there's an adjustment to the walking pattern. The New Living Translation translates verse 1, the second part of it, serve me faithfully and live a blameless life. But a literal translation of the phrase, so if you went to the ESV, it says, walk before me and be blameless. In fact, a more accurate sense of this command to Abraham is walk about before me and be a person of integrity. God did not instruct Abraham to walk with him, although he may not be excluding this concept. Walking with God was a reference to being in a relationship with God or a friendship with God, but Enoch and Noah had a friendship with God. Both Enoch and Noah did. Nor did God only instruct Abraham to walk before him, which would simply imply an act of service, similar to the English phrase, wait on me. Rather, God commanded Abraham to walk about before me. The implication is that Abraham should live a life going and coming as if he was always before the Lord. Now, this covenant scene that we see in Genesis 17 is going to involve a couple of things. First, God making promises to Abraham. In the original Hebrew, the words of God in verse 4 begin with, I myself, this is my covenant. It also includes God issuing requirements to Abraham, verses 9 through 14. God including Sarah, making promises to her as well, verses 15 and 16. Abraham falls on his face and speaks to himself, speaks to God, and then God responds. And then Abraham gets up and does as God said. So the reader gets this impression that this is this holy, sacred conversation. Even Abraham's response, falling on his face, indicates that the scene is one of reverence and awe. Yet, in the middle of such this holy scenario, God instructs Abraham to walk about before me, or to go on living your daily life as if you are in the presence or in my presence every moment. God's promises and his covenant will be fulfilled as Abraham goes about his everyday activities. God's great actions and his great plans take place in the middle or in the midst of the mundane day-to-day activities of our lives. God does not work only on Sundays. He is at work on the holy day and the work day. Everyday activities are incorporated into God's massive, intricate plan for humanity and history. So sure, let's talk about a couple of things. One, what everyday activity would be different if we did it as if we were before the presence of God? What do you think? You don't have to give a personal example, but in general, what activity do you think people would do differently if they realized they were doing it in God's presence?
Well, because this is just something that's on my mind all the time, the first thing that comes to my mind is parenting. Because, parenting is a challenge from beginning to end, every stage that you go through. And the challenges can change. And you're in different points in your life, just like your kids are. But I feel like if we could truly grasp the fact that we are God's ambassadors in our children's lives, it is our job to show them God and to lead them toward a relationship with him. I think that in light of that bigger picture, we would probably make some decisions a lot differently.
Mm-hmm.
Things that just feel like frustrations or inconveniences at the time. discipline issues, things like that.
Yeah, I think that probably would be at the top of the list
Mhm.
if we realized, okay, this has eternal impact. God's
Yeah.
watching. I mean, God's sitting in the room while I'm doing this. I'm going to do it differently. I think that's a question that I have applied almost directly, exactly like this, to my viewing and listening habits.
Mhm.
So if God was sitting in the other recliner,
Mhm.
would this be what I chose?
Mhm.
Right? If God was riding with me in the car, would this be the podcast I would listen to
Yeah.
or the book I would listen to?
Guess what he is?
But that's right, he is. But we don't process things
No,
that
we
way.
don't. We
I
don't.
mean, that's what he's telling Abraham. You're going to go about your life, and I'm going to be standing here watching. The New Testament says it a little bit more clearly. Do everything as unto the Lord, or everything as the Lord is. You're doing it for the Lord. But I don't think I think it would change our speech.
Mhm.
I think it would. Obviously, it changes the spiritual things. How often we read our Bible, how much time we spend in prayer, um, our fellowship with other believers. I think it. I mean, those are those are the things people listening probably expect us to say,
Mhm.
right? Oh, y'all are preachers, you're pastors, that you're going to say that, right?
Mhm.
But I think when you realize, I even think things like, let's say, people who work by the hour, who aren't who maybe spend a couple hours watching cat videos or something, on
Uh-huh.
social media, or, taking care of personal business.
Yeah.
I think we would handle that differently if we recognized God was present.
Yeah. And simple things like you're talking about, the things you listen to. I even think about the amount of time that you're willing to give to those things, even if you're not doing it consciously, where all of a sudden you look up and realize I've been on social media for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
If you were really thinking about the
You never
fact,
thought you would utter those words, did you?
what?
I've been on social media for an hour.
Well, I don't think I can say that I've done it too many times. It's just not, I don't know, it's not a
Right.
huge draw in my life, but I can think of other things that I spend time doing that,
Yeah.
well, I'm like, I cannot believe I just wasted that much time on that,
Right.
But I think if we thought about it in the terms of, oh, if I had to account personally to God for how I just spent the last 2 hours, would I feel good about that?
Mm-hmm.
And I think about it in terms of things like even how we treat our bodies. I mean, if it is God given and it's our instrument for how we're living our lives, it'd be pretty tough for us to make some of the decisions that we make about how we treat
Yeah.
ourselves. If
How
it's,
we eat.
yeah, if
Yeah.
how we eat,
Not
how we,
exercise.
yeah, just not, I mean, I'm not saying you got to be like a bodybuilder, but just giving yourself a chance to have
Mm-hmm.
decent health. I think that we would feel differently about the decisions that we were making if we knew we had to say before God, like, oh, I handled this faithfully. I did
Yeah.
as good a job as I could with it. I use your resources well.
Yeah. We think in terms of, I do really good about going to church, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't do really good about some other things that really matter. And
Yeah.
there's this quote by Saint Teresa of Avila. It says, "Know that even when you're in the kitchen, our Lord moves amidst the pots and pans." I mean, as you're going through your everyday life, do you think about that? Well, a couple of days ago, you said, "Does anybody else see these dishes?"
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever think, well, God's in the dishes?
Well, I do definitely find times where I have to remind myself because for a while I did live on my own before Kevin and I got married. And so, like, I never had to do housework because I am one of those people who just tends to clean up after
Mm-hmm.
myself as I'm doing things. And I sometimes will think back to like, dang, I used to not ever have to. I wasn't cleaning after 4 people. I was just cleaning up
Right.
after one person. But then I also try really hard to remind myself why I have that work to do, why it exists, and it's because of the people that I love
Mm-hmm.
and the people that God has put in my life, and that I am that representation for them. of how to be faithful with the stuff that might seem like it's just an inconvenience and really doesn't matter
That's good.
at the time.
Yeah.
And you know what the old saying, especially about your kids, like you can tell them to do whatever you want to do, but what they're going to see is what you're actually doing and how you're living your life. And that is going to be the biggest influence on them.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Not your advice, but your actions.
Your actions. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around the book of Genesis.